So, now the fun part. I'd like to open the floor to some questions. So I ask, who has the first question? Keen hand just there, young gentleman. Please stand up, tell us who you are, where you come from, and then your question. One per member.
The microphone.
We'll repeat it for you, don't worry.
Mr. Farage claims that 75% of laws in Britain are made in Brussels. But if you check in the House of Commons library, it's actually less than 10%. 75% of laws in Britain are approved in Brussels, not made. So I'm asking, are you misconstruing facts about your own political agenda?
Right. The question was that I claim that 75% of our laws are made in Brussels, but the House of Commons library says it's less than 10%. Am I fabricating things to make up the UKIP argument? Well, let me tell you this. In Germany, Roman Herzog, who was president of Germany in the 1990s, after he retired, became concerned at what had happened to German democracy. You know, democracy, very much a post-1945 concept in Germany, and actually, when the Germans finally got a proper democratic system, they made it work rather well. Roman Herzog did a report, and he found that between 1998 and 2006, of federal laws made in Germany, 84% had originated in the European Union. So it may well be that of national laws in Britain, our estimate of 75% may, I agree with you sir, be too low. It may be too low. The way the House of Commons fiddle the figures is they add in every single traffic regulation made by a local authority and class those as laws to try and get the percentage down. But I promise you, I've got friends of mine who sit in the House of Commons, and no longer does the British House of Commons discuss the great vital issues about the health and well-being of British business and British industry. That has all now been subcontracted out to the institutions of the European Union, and all that Parliament does now is to have a whole regular series of committee meetings, televised committee meetings, where they call people in and grill them, but actually in terms of making legislation, they don't do anything. And that's why British general elections have been reduced to a debate about health and education. They are the only questions that have been debated, really, by Labour and Conservatives at the last 3, maybe 4 general elections, because they're the last things the British government actually has any say over. So no, I absolutely defend the figure that I put to you. I point out that actually in Germany they recognise that figure to be worse. And I want to say this to you as a 17-year-old. You know, I absolutely believe that the form of government that we created in this country, backed up by the principles of Magna Carta, where there was no imprisonment without charge, where we were presumed innocent before we were guilty, and where we had the ability to call on 12 of our fellow men and women to judge in a trial whether we were innocent or guilty. Britain may have done many things wrong over the years, but in terms of providing the fairest legal system and the best form of parliamentary democracy, we should apologise to no one in the world, because we've done it better than anybody, and we should not surrender it to these rotten institutions that are undemocratic and are not working in our interests.
My name is Brian Tinsley. I'm from Leigh, Greater Manchester. My question to the leader is, can he expand any more on the HS2 rail project that will affect a lot part of this country? Now, in London, I have a couple of lads live there, and I understand where they live. It's a very big Conservative constituency around there. And they're saying, no, we're going to go underground, tunnel it, and save all this valuable property. Can you put any light on what's going to happen with this, or we're just going to steamroll it like everything else?
I'm going to be, tomorrow morning, I'm going to be in Manchester, or to be more precise, I should be in Sale East of Wythenshawe, where UKIP have picked an excellent candidate to fight the by-election. But tomorrow afternoon, I've got 3 meetings tomorrow afternoon and evening. So, good job I got a strong voice, isn't it? And I'm going to be in Buckinghamshire tomorrow afternoon, doing 3 separate meetings down the HS2 route. Can I say this to you, sir? I actually think this country does need more investment in its railways. And I say that because, do you know, it takes 5 hours, 11 minutes to get from Paddington to Penzance. It was quicker in August 1914 to get to Penzance than it is now. If you try and go by train from London to Norwich, or any of those towns and cities out in East Anglia, it takes forever because the lines are desperately old-fashioned. There are 150,000 people, and I was one of them this morning, who stand for more than half an hour every single morning and every single evening going to and from their place of work in London. And I know that some of the northern cities also have those problems. So we do have problems with our rail network. But we don't have a problem, in my opinion, with the London to Manchester railway. Because I regularly go from London to Manchester. I think Virgin run a pretty good service, actually. And you know what? I get on a train in Euston, and in 2 hours, 2 minutes, I get out, not on the outskirts of Manchester, I get out in Manchester Piccadilly. I'm in the middle of the business district of Manchester in 2 hours and 2 minutes. I do not buy the argument that cutting that by 45 or 50 minutes would actually make much difference to the economy of this country at all. And actually, all the experience in France, and remember France is 2.5 times the size of this country, all the experience of France, when they built the TGV, is that actually the more cities became closer in time to Paris, the more business it drove to Paris, not to the outlying centres. So I don't even buy the argument that it'll help the northwest economy. And how it'll help the economy of this constituency, with trains rattling through at 186 miles per hour, frankly, is beyond me. And the cost of it. Hasn't anyone noticed we're skint? We're skint. I mean, the elephant in the room of British politics is that we're still borrowing. In the 4th year of this coalition, we'll be borrowing £110 billion more than we earn. And the most stunning statistic is this. At the end of this 5-year coalition, our national debt, which we've been building up since we took on Napoleon, our national debt will have increased by 40% in the lifetime of this coalition government. And we are leaving a legacy. We are leaving a repayment legacy. And bear in mind, base rates of 0.5% won't last forever. You know, many in this room who I'm sure had mortgages in the early 80s and found life a shock at 17 and 18%. And we're storing up a massive repayment problem for our children. So I am completely and utterly opposed to the HS2 project. Only 2% of the travelling public of this country go from London to Manchester. 2%. And the other 98% are going to get a rotten deal for the benefit of 2%, who will have to pay exorbitant fares. Well, they're pretty dear now, aren't they? But exorbitant fares to use it. Frankly, I think the thing is a project, once again, of great political vanity and folly, and we are wholeheartedly, as a party, opposed to it, but for upgrading the rail networks in this country for 1/3 of the cost to the benefit of millions. Okay, Amanda asked the question, and I have to say, Amanda, I didn't like the question. You said, if Britain were to pull out of the European Union. We don't want into that sort of talk, Wilson, do we? It's when Britain pulls out, will we effectively be in breach of contract? Will there be terrible penalties to pay? I mean, that basically is your question, is, you know, can we do this legally? And can we do this without it being a very bloody, nasty, unpleasant business? Is that the gist of your question? Right, they've all got that now. There's never been a treaty in the history of mankind that hasn't been broken at some point in time. Indeed, there is a Vienna Convention on how to break treaties. What is interesting about our position is this, that the Treaty of Lisbon became law in this country a few years ago. I wish it hadn't. I wish Cameron had honoured his pledge for us to have a referendum, but the Treaty of Lisbon became law. And much as my natural temptation is to set fire to the thing, we have to actually respect the rule of law. That is the law of the land. The Queen gave her assent to that treaty. That treaty has within it a legal roadmap through which we divorce ourselves from European Union. It's called Article 50. We invoke Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, and it's written down very clearly. That is a statement of our intention to leave the European Union, and it gives us a breathing space of up to 2 years while we sort out what the alternative arrangements will be. And in that intervening period of up to 2 years, we are totally protected in terms of trade and some of the things that the scaremongers, like Clegg, Miliband and Cameron, would have us believe. So the first part, the first answer to your question is, legally, there is a roadmap there that we can use to do this. I very much hope that it doesn't take anything like 2 years to sort this thing out, but I'd rather it took 3 or 4 months than a fortnight if we got something that actually was the right relationship and would serve this country well for many, many decades to come. All right? That is the magnitude and importance of it. Would there be any financial penalties? Do you know, we're currently ploughing into this mob £55 million a day. £55 million a day we pay into an organisation whose accounts have not been signed off by the auditors for 18 years in a row. I mean, you couldn't invent it. It takes somebody of the extraordinary talent of Neil Kinnock to defend it, you know. That's a gross figure. Net, it's over £30 million a day, but much of the money that comes back is spent in ways that you and I honestly would not choose. All right? Now, but can I just go on from that to perhaps the big debate, and it's this. Cameron, Clegg, and the Miliband, these guys appear, plus Mandelson pops up and the wretched Kinnock. I've got Kinnock on the brain. They pop up as, and people that are businessmen appear. Businessmen appear on the BBC. There's a fellow called Sir Andrew Khan who appears on the BBC. Look out for Sir Andrew Khan. He's one of the leading business figures advocating Britain must stay in the European Union. Businessman. He spent his entire career working for the European Commission and was Neil Kinnock's chef de cabinet. In the last 5 years, he was a European Commissioner. Age 60, Khan retired from the Commission with a vast pension, became a non-executive director of a couple of companies, and now speaks as the voice of business. And these people tell us that if we weren't part of this union, they wouldn't buy our widgets. And 3.5 billion people would lose their jobs immediately, and within 2 years, we would all be living in caves. All right? Well, that's more or less it, isn't it? First point to make is these are the same idiots who were telling us 12 years ago, if we didn't join the euro, Britain would be sunk. Well, thank God we didn't listen to them 12 years ago, and we kept the pound. But more than that, you know, a lot of people in this room would have voted for us to stay in the common market, right? They did so because they'd grown up in a world after the Wall Street crash, after World War II, where actually tariffs on manufactured goods were very, very high. It wasn't uncommon in the early 60s for tariffs on cars or washing machines to be 40% or more. But that world, that solution, was the solution to a problem of the 1960s, not the solution to a problem of 2014. There's something called globalisation has taken place. And actually, tariff barriers on manufacturers right across the world have declined to almost nothing. But the real reason why there would be no trade recrimination against the United Kingdom is because we buy from them £45 billion worth of goods more every single year that we sell to them. The United Kingdom is now Germany's biggest export market in the world. Can you imagine Angela Merkel going along cheerily, as she always does, I shouldn't be cruel, but no, I shouldn't. But I did have lunch with her once, and I can let you into a secret that Angela Merkel, actually, if you look at her in public, I can promise you in private, she's even more miserable than she looks. But can you imagine Angela Merkel going to the chief executives of Mercedes, Audi, and saying, Volkswagen, and saying, we're about to enter into a trade war with your biggest trading partner in the world? I don't think so. Economic pragmatism and business will out. You know, Norway trades with the EU without being members. Switzerland trades with them without being members. Mexico trades with the EU on free trade terms without being members. These are pure scaremongering stories, and not only will British business, completely unaffected, go on doing business with the European Union, but here's the positive. The positive is that we will win back the ability to negotiate our own trade deals with other parts of the world, which we're currently forbidden from doing. We've got some Dutch bureaucrat who negotiates British trade around the world. I want a British minister negotiating trade around the world, and I'll tell you the first place we'll start in broadening British trade around the world. We'll do it with a group of countries that have within them 2.2 billion people. That is 30% of the population of the earth. They speak English, they enjoy common law, they enjoy parliamentary democracy, they have similar contract law to this country. Goodness knows they even like us and stand by our side and defend us when we're in trouble. And the sooner we extend the concept of free trade beyond the realms of Europe and bring back into the British family the Commonwealth of Nations, the better it will be. The current Hammond plan is to reduce the number of regular soldiers in this country to 82,000, which is a figure smaller than we've had since the reign of Queen Anne. But it's okay, there's no problem, because what we're going to do is we're going to abolish the Territorial Army, which has been there for 100 years, and rebrand it and rename it as the Army Reserve, and we'll have 30,000 people in the Army Reserve who are free whenever we want them or whenever we need them for soldiering duties. That is the Hammond plan, all right? Let me tell you, my father is president of the County of London Yeomanry Regiment. He's been in the thing for about 70 years, I think, and he's very actively involved with the running of that regiment. When it was the Territorial Army, over the years, recruitment wasn't that difficult because the employers accepted that, you know, Charlie might pop off early on the odd Friday, and Charlie needed a fortnight's camp every year on top of his, you know, normal holiday entitlement, but that was about it for the employer. What increasingly we've done, as the TA has morphed into this new concept of Army Reserve, is Charlie has gone to Afghanistan for 6 months, or Iraq for 5 months. And the employer says, look, you know, if you were being taken for the defence of the realm, because we were being directly threatened, I wouldn't mind. But as you're going off on what many of us see as military adventures abroad that are doomed to failure before we even start, the employers are suddenly finding this a little bit difficult. And I can promise you, they will not get the recruitment in this new Army Reserve to back up the cut in our forces. And I have to say, UKIP draws its vote from across the spectrum. We get, like I said earlier, the Labour vote, the Lib Dem vote, the non-voter. But I come from a family who've been Conservative voters. I come from a family that have had many generations that have served in the army. And I have to say that it beggars belief that it's a Conservative-led government that has not only slashed the army to the size it was during the reign of Queen Anne, but has closed the Portsmouth dockyard and turned that city into a museum and is slashing our defence spending to below 2%. And as Robert Gates, the former US Defence Secretary, said, you know, Britain is no longer going to be seen as being a serious player in military affairs across the world. And if the Argentinians, and okay, we are more heavily manned than we were in '82, but if the Argentinians did take the Falklands, we wouldn't even have the capability to take it back. And all of that happening at the same time as he's doubling spending on foreign aid, which in many cases is propping up rotten dictators.
David Cameron became the Prime Minister. I was going on exponentially, and I joined UKIP because of Nigel and because of the policies. Let me just get a question on our HS2. Very important. You know, I deal with all the action groups throughout the UK, probably 300,000 to 400,000 people that are badly affected by HS2. And UKIP is the only major party that will kill HS2. Thank God. Now, I think before I get to the question, the first thing I want to say is that if Her Majesty calls you to the Buckingham Palace to form a government, I'm quite happy that HS2 will be stopped. Perfectly happy. But whatever you say, I'd really like you to say to all of the people that are affected by HS2 about the situation if we form a coalition. The question that I ask regularly, because I've pushed down the line now, no votes for you with HS2. So any political party that supports HS2 don't get affected people's HS2 vote. And that's 300,000 to 400,000 people. And hopefully we can get some of those as members. The question being, I think, Nigel, is that we want to see HS2 as a red line. And if you form a coalition, can you warrant to us that it will still be a red line and you will stand firm, and just like on Europe, just like on immigration, just like on defence, you will stop?
Trevor, I thank you for your question, and I welcome you as one of Cameron's lost millions into UKIP. I don't think my position on HS2 could be any clearer. Firstly, from the answer to the gentleman earlier on this evening, and secondly, the fact that the whole of my Saturday afternoon and evening is going to be in Buckinghamshire doing HS2 meetings. As I say, I want modern rail travel in this country. I don't want us blowing 50 billion plus on something for a tiny percentage of people in Britain that I don't see for any benefit. If we get to the point in 2015 where we are in a position to possibly join or not join, because remember, the option to going into coalition is not going into coalition. I'm not sure that actually appeared, sort of even crossed Clegg's radar. He was so excited about the prospect. The absolute red line for UKIP has to be the referendum on getting control of our country and our birthright back. If that's not on the table, there's not even a negotiation. If they're not prepared to talk about that, then Nuttall and I will go to the markets at Granby and spend the day there. All right? As for other issues, I cannot and I will not lay down a shopping list right now of things that could potentially be part of a coalition agreement. What you do have my assurance on is that of the 4 or 5 things that I would want to see as being part of a coalition deal, right up at the top below Europe, is reducing excessive government expenditure, because we cannot go on living as we are. Remember, this coalition government was formed to solve the deficit. They've done no such thing. They've done no such thing. So reducing government expenditure to a sensible level where we are not indebting our grandchildren every day would be up there, right behind getting back control of the nation and getting immigration back to sensible levels. And HS2 is absolutely a part of that mix, because no private money will come for HS2. So that will be £50 billion.
100 billion.
Well, maybe 100, if we play the Joker and double it, I have no idea. All we know from the O2 and the Scottish Parliament is whatever estimate you get for a government-led project, it always runs over. So I would suggest to you that without being explicit at this stage about HS2, my commitment to getting government spending down means for me HS2 is an impossible project. Thank you.